Welcome back to the Blue Hour. You might notice that we have a different setup today. Charlie and I are in the same room recording for the first time in 34 episodes. So,
yes, yeah, crazy. I'm really looking forward to it. Stoked.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about everything we can. We left on a cliffhanger at our last episode. Sam Altman had been fired. Greg Brockman had left OpenAI. And like 95% of the company had committed to leaving.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll do a recap on that. We'll talk about, we just talked about it, the 1-year anniversary of ChatGPT.
Yeah.
We'll talk about Gemini, which was released today.
By Google.
Yeah. We have some more stuff when we talk about GPTs. We'll probably cut this into a two-parter. So halfway through, we're going to get as much juice out of being in the same room as we possibly can.
Exactly.
Let's kick it off, though, with OpenAI drama.
Yeah, we left off last episode with Erich saying that he thinks Sam Altman will go back to OpenAI, which was pretty omniscient in retrospect. And a lot of people I told that prediction to didn't take credit for it, but I did mention it to several people.
Yeah.
They were all taken aback. They didn't think that was a realistic option, but they don't really know.
So. Yeah. It did, in retrospect, maybe I'm just getting better at some of these weird, like, techie things. I've just seen enough weird drama where it really felt like the only amenable thing. Like having 700 employees leave the biggest AI company or the most successful AI company just doesn't logically make any sense if you're on the board.
Yeah. Even then, though, for me, I haven't rewatched that today. My reaction, but I remember my reaction being like, "Oh wow!" I don't even think I had a hot take because I was like, "Fuck, that's such a good one. That's got to be the way we end it," and that's the way we ended it. So even still, I didn't see it coming. I mean, I don't know, but
for those who weren't locked to X or the news, I think we on Monday recorded, and then on Wednesday. They announced
maybe Tuesday end of day.
Yeah, maybe Tuesday end of the day. They announced that, and this is before Thanksgiving, so everybody was working. Basically, everybody said they were leaving. Microsoft said they're creating a research division to bring on Sam and Greg, who had left, and then all of the employees who wanted to come over. And then the next day, they announced in this big announcement that Sam would be back as CEO. Greg is back as well. The board had changed up, and basically they'd gotten rid of Ilya Mura, I think, is off as well.
Yeah, and Helen's not on.
Helen Toner. And they'd added 2 new people. It's a very small board still with the intention of growing. I think Microsoft gets a non-voting seat now on the board. So they changed up the board. Sam's back, Greg's back, and all the employees were staying.
Yeah, and there were job offers from big wigs, like CEOs. The CEO of Salesforce kept sending job offers to people.
Yeah,
like huge salaries. But OpenAI is really known for their high salaries. So
I think they average like 900 for researchers or engineers, like $900K a year.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah,
geez, that's crazy. That's a lot of money.
So
it's crazy. So then ultimately, since then, what's been happening? I've seen a lot of pictures on Twitter of Greg doing selfies and meetings.
Yeah. So it was like the weirdest probably week to ever work at a company, because within 5 days they went from canning the CEO, losing like one of the co-founders, everybody agreeing to leave, to they're back in the office coding, they shipped an update on Thursday or on Wednesday. Right before they came back, they shipped the voice, the voice in the app for 3.5.
So that means for free users. You don't have to be a Plus user in order to have access to that, which is amazing. That's like the coolest feature on ChatGPT, sometimes at least.
Yeah, it's super cool. Like for anybody who only uses free but has the app, you got to try it.
Yes, worth it. Absolutely.
We actually used it. I bought a car on Monday, and I used it while I was test driving the car to ask about a sound in the engine, which is a crazy thing. And then you used it, or you're trying to use it to ask questions about an inspection report or a report on the car from a few days or a week earlier.
Yeah.
Which was just a wild way to change the car buying process.
Yeah, it's amazing. So then I think one thing that people are interested in is why this happened.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, no one knows.
There's really no good answer. It seems like the most likely thing that I had seen was that Sam Altman Helen Toner was kind of doing some things that they didn't like, and then Sam was like kind of backdoor trying to get her kicked off the board. And
by things he didn't like, I think it was really that she was casting doubt on there was something she had written a research paper that sort of looked down on down on ChatGPT in comparison to other large language models.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so I think that's the context there. Is that
yeah, and that's all rumor too.
Yeah, it's conjecture.
Suspect.
We don't even know. Yeah.
But then so people had thought that Ilya kind of saw through it and thought it wasn't great, and then when it came to the board, like Helen and I guess others had decided that they had to act fast if they were going to get through, so nobody would change their mind. So they just did it as fast as they could, which is so dumb to think that it wouldn't go well. I mean, a horrible move on anybody's part to can the CEO without an actual good press release. Besides, we feel like we couldn't communicate with him,
Yeah.
And it seems like everybody was like, they did something wrong. AGI has been achieved and they're afraid that he's going to ruin it.
Yeah.
It turns out like, no, they just were doing corporate bullshit to each other.
And Helen's an academic. She's at Duke or Johns Hopkins or something.
Yeah.
UNC.
I didn't really retain any of the information I learned about her. I think she's also married or related to somebody. She might be married to Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Oh, wow. What?
I think
that's
so.
Random.
Yeah, I remember that part.
Jeez, that's random.
Yeah, and she writes academic papers and has been contributing to AI research for a long time, I think.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but unfortunately, we're still we just don't know what happened really. And there have been some interesting papers or articles really that came out that, unfortunately, they just don't have any details. It stinks, and no one seems to know. And the new board, apparently, because I read an interview the next, I don't know, I think it was last week, so a week after all the hubbub, and it was with Sam and Mira. And I think I sent it to you because it's really short. It was on I don't know, I forget where it was, like Slashdot or something like that. But he really couldn't answer any questions. And he said that the board is going to do a thorough investigation of what had happened. But I mean, who knows what that means and what the timeline might be and what the priority is of it. I mean, in terms of releasing the fastest growing consumer app in history in the last year, speaking of it being, a year old. So I think it's really, really interesting. I don't know that we'll ever find out. And I think it's honestly going to be pretty underwhelming.
Yeah.
If we do.
Yeah, I doubt they'll. And Sam wrote an open article, I think, that went on the blog or an announcement too. But it just feels very weird and personal, whatever happened. Because he also said in that, I really care about Ilya and I hope he stays on. And we're going to try to keep him on. Which means they're thinking about canning Ilya, who's one of the co-founders, the researcher who potentially drove the most towards some of their big breakthroughs. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's wild. Yeah.
Ilya is such an interesting character in comparison. I feel as though he always has this dystopian perspective of this could get really bad really quick, which I don't necessarily love. I'm a little bit more of an optimist, but I'm not the person who would be the voice people would listen to. So we really want to know what his perspective is. And if it's that negative, it sort of it's easy to draw the conclusion it got real bad real quick.
Yeah.
So I don't know what he'll end up doing, but I did hear there was an interview very famously done with Andrew Sorkin, something like that, from I don't know, he's an NBC figurehead. He's a news guy who doesn't ask very good questions. And honestly, the most interesting thing about him is the fact that he has two different colored eyes, I think. But he interviewed Elon during New York Times Book Week or something like that in New York City a couple weeks ago or last week. It was actually last Thursday. It was the night that last Wednesday, the night before I traveled here. And he said that Andrew asked him, I think that's his last name is Sorkin. Sorkin asked him, and Elon took some time and then said, I know Ilya and I trust his judgment. And he's not in this for some sort of power hungry capitalistic motivation as much as he's very interested in this technology and wants for it to be scaled sort of morally. And he understands the potential safety risks.
Yeah. And
so he was sort of casting doubt on Sam.
Yeah.
And saying that Sam is sort of this, capitalist. And I mean, Sam probably has how many board seats? I don't even know how many board seats is probably not a good measurement because he probably could have thousands. But in terms of investments in organizations, just with his affiliation at YC, he probably has investment in thousands of companies from his exposure. And if not investments as a good metric, then it's just his exposure, tens of thousands of organizations. Yeah. He's had such an interesting impact, and he's a figure that we've been talking about for so many years, just in startup software space. So YC is such an impactful organization. And I feel as though anybody in the public lens, it's easy to sort of alienate or sort of ostracize or make an antagonist. I don't know. How much of it's true, I'm sure we'll never meet the guy. Last time we spoke about him at length, I like made fun of him for being a robot. So I don't think he's going to want to chat with me anytime soon. But
he is. I've seen interesting things talked about him in the last week, mainly because he doesn't directly have equity in OpenAI. He's been public about that. He has a minor stake in YC, which means through that their stake in OpenAI funnels down. But also he has investments in fusion energy. He has apparently an investment in a GPU builder that is going to have like a deal with OpenAI, which isn't crazy to me. Like there are GPU shortages and not enough people doing that work. Completely fine with that. And
ChatGPT app today tweeted, and we talked about the fact that they don't have enough GPU to actually allow for new people to sign up. So like that's clearly a huge problem.
Yeah. And also he works on it so much. It's like, if you work in the space, you identify opportunities where you're like, oh, this would be great to invest time and money because I'll make money. Like that's just part of.
Yeah.
So I don't think he's in it to never make any money. And I think he's going to be, independently, I think he's made like close to $500 million already, and he's in his mid to late 30s.
Yeah, I don't think I doubt at that stage you even think about how much you need to make, like how much more you need. I feel like you're just there already. I don't know.
I know. Yeah, it's wild.
He doesn't have any kids. I think he's openly gay, so he's not going to have it.
Yeah.
He might adopt. Who knows?
He actually is married to the co-founder of his first startup.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
His co-founder?
Yeah.
Wow.
I looked that up.
What was his first startup?
It's called Looped. I think it was similar to Foursquare, where it was like location-based social software or something like that.
Crazy. It's
in the first batch of YC.
Oh, I had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
2008. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so cool.
Or is in the first, at least, batch in California. It might have been second, but he was in the same one, I think, as Twitch, or the co-founders of Twitch, and maybe the co-founder of Reddit. A bunch of like really cool companies came out of there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, unfortunately, the drama just like instead of having a final or like coming to an end, is just sort of like is going to fizzle out. I think because we're not going to actually know what happened, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's true. So we'll see if there's updates. We'll talk about them. But very weird thing to watch.
Yeah, seriously. That happened on Friday. That was Friday night. The weekend was crazy. That Monday we recorded the pod, and then the next day or 2 days later was the Whisper announcement. It was like, what the fuck? They're still shipping? This is amazing. But there are no more signups, obviously, for Plus. That's still the case, which stinks.
Yeah.
And I think, ChatGPT has been somewhat buggy.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think I'm a little I don't know. It seems as though the vast majority, if not everybody, came back.
Yeah.
The sentiment, at least according to these leaders within the company who tweet all day or post all day on X, they want you to think that everything's amazing.
Yeah. I don't think everything's okay, but
it can't be.
Hopefully they'll bring some more adults in the room. It feels like so. It's a great time to talk about. It was the year anniversary 6 days ago, November 30th of ChatGPT's release, which is kind of when they saw exponential growth, and really nobody was paying attention in the broader sphere of what I see into OpenAI. And then it was kind of like light switch 12 months ago. And I'm assuming based on what happened last week or 2 weeks ago, that they weren't prepared for that and didn't have the mechanisms to actually act like a grown-up company. They had a bunch of great people that they hired, but their board was kind of fucked, and definitely heavy on the research, not heavy on the we're going to have 100 million weekly active users. We should figure out ways to deal with that and be a research lab and a nonprofit and figure out the best ways to weigh that. So hopefully they know. But
so the same tweet today that said that we don't have enough GPTs was actually a reply to somebody, because the person who had replied had said, we need you to turn off of is it the rate limiting? Yeah. So you can only send a certain number of messages in, and then at a certain point it caps you for 3 hours. Is that the time? Eric keeps hitting the rate limiting. So that's why I know he knows. I don't know off the top of my head.
I've hit it 4 or 5 times this week. And it's
exactly.
Wednesday.
Yeah.
So there is it's just based on using it a lot. You can't use it a lot, otherwise you'll get throttled and they'll make you wait, which is fine.
Yeah.
For me, it's been like that. It was like that in March, April when I was building Prompt Perfect. I was hitting those, but not like this. It seems like it's way more finicky.
The original tweet they had sent was about the fact that the original design of ChatGPT was not as a consumer app as much as it was a research assistant. That was the tweet that they had sent. I think that I don't mean to spread spread blasphemy, but that seems to be the official ChatGPT app Twitter.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So that to me is a very odd thing to write because it sort of implies
It was a research preview is what it was.
that's what they said.
Yeah, it wasn't they didn't release it as a consumer app. It was literally free for everybody. All you do is create an account.
Yeah.
And then you got to interact. So it's basically to show off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then another release led to the ChatGPT, or you're saying that then
no, that was called ChatGPT. Yeah. But there was no way to charge for it. So it wasn't really an app. They called it. It used to say at the bottom, "There's a research preview."
Cool.
And that has since changed since when GPT-4 launched. They started charging for Plus subscriptions, and that's when it changed to a consumer.
Got it.
So honestly, it's been like, I don't know, 8 months that they've been an actual paid product.
Yeah.
At least ChatGPT.
Such an interesting thing to say that though, because it seems as though the implication is like we might go back and like, make this a research assistant. Like, I don't know, like a research.
I kind of read it as like it's crazy that it's grown this much.
Oh, okay.
Because it was launched as this little thing that we wanted people to see how they could play around with the OpenAI API. But instead it turned into this thing that people had never, like, they're like, I've never experienced anything like this.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's fair. Okay. That makes me feel better. Because when I read that, I was like, what the fuck? Like, why are you making me feel like you're going to go back to the research days and get rid of all the consumer? Like, we're building a business on top of this, dude.
Yeah. I did see it. So they brought in a very, very like 2-day CEO to take over Sam's spot, like a whatever it's called, intermediary or
yeah, we didn't even talk about it.
Yeah, but he said afterwards, he's like, from all the conversations I had,
Elliot something.
No, fuck, I can't remember. He's the guy, one of the co-founders, Emmett Shear, one of the co-founders of Twitch.
Yeah.
But he said, through the conversations, they're definitely still leaning into paid products and consumer products, which is good.
Yeah,
and that wasn't the reason for it. Some people were like, they are mad that all this energy goes towards things that are products rather than the research. And he seemed to think that wasn't the issue from talking.
Yeah, I think I brought that up on the last pod, and I was saying like there's this potential tension with taking resources from the security team and putting them onto the consumer app side, and that's potentially creating spite or whatever. But I like to hear that. I think Emmett did a good job. He was in a really tough spot.
Yeah.
For Elliot?
Emmett.
Yeah, Emmett. Yeah, really tough spot. Immediately, all those figures, immediately with all that spotlight on them, everyone's like, this fucking guy, like he said this. And it's like, this dude is like actually he's very philosophical. I've been following him for he's an interesting guy who really is skeptical. He's like a very skeptical person. So he'll take the side of arguments that not everybody likes, not because he thinks that it's cool, but because he's like, I think intellectually stimulated by taking these. He just seems very like he's a lot of intellectual depth. Yeah. So people are like posting all this sex. They're like, he's sexist. And I was reading through the things like, that's not sexist though. It's just like sort of casting potential like doubt on things and like trying to be inquisitive. And that's a tough, I don't know, man. I can't imagine being famous. It just sounds terrible.
Yeah. I saw that people who worked at OpenAI had said that he signed off early on Sunday night on his first day, and they were making fun of him for not working through the night.
Wow, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, they were being fucking. Apparently, he tried to call an all hands too on their Slack.
Yeah, no one joined.
They all put a "fuck you" emoji reaction on Slack, like they didn't want. They were basically like doing an internal coup.
So childish.
I know.
Like it's as if it was his fault. Like
I think they were just mad that they didn't get. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of childish shit going on there.
Well, that's the thing. And all these photos that Greg's taking with these rooms, he's like going into rooms and like he's taking selfies at the front with like 15 people behind him. It's happened like 4 or 5 at least times.
They're creepy. Yeah.
I had to turn off the notifications for Greg's tweets because it was just like I don't want to look at these selfies. It's like kind of weird. But if you look at the group behind him, they all look like 20-somethings, young people. Which I don't know if like that, I don't know. I've worked in enough software startups, SaaS startups where it's like, I don't know, man. Like those are not like, they think that they're the most brilliant people in the world and they went to Stanford and Harvard, but are they like I don't know. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know.
I do think it'd be interesting to touch on, it's been a year since ChatGPT came out. 8 months since Plus and GPT-4 and getting access to browsing and code interpreter. Like a year ago, there's a lot of things that I didn't do. It's like completely changed the way that I work and the things that I do and where I spend my time. I spend so much time in ChatGPT now, and I spend an insane amount of time talking to a technology that nobody used a year and a month ago. really. I mean, there were some wrapper apps. That's how I found it originally, is how I found OpenAI, because I played around the playground before ChatGPT and was like thinking about learning how to make these copywriting things, because they had Copy AI, Jasper.
Oh yeah.
There was a few of those that I thought were cool but not great, which kind of led me to a pre-ChatGPT. But I think ChatGPT launched to be like, here's an example of how to do it that's good. These copywriting things are all right, but none of them are really great, you know.
Yeah.
But it's wild how quickly the world can change, and just like your own day to day can mold around this new technology that you use and interact with, and be way more productive. Like I can be insanely productive if I choose to focus and do it and figure out how to talk or build something. And it's just wild to me.
Yeah, it's astounding.
Yeah.
There's so many copycats now. There's so, not necessarily copycats, but like between Bing, which really is literally a copycat. I didn't mean to like set myself up for that. But then Bard, and then Perplexity, and there's so many others that are Anthropic. There's so many different people building something that is in like the chat bot space, and also in like the ability, like the multimodal ability to find information across like a very large surface area, as opposed to having to use Siri for your app, and then for your phone, and then use Alexa for your whatever devices those are, and for your Amazon stuff. So like the intermingling of it is becoming much more just completely standard, and people are going to soon forget that wasn't a thing a year and a month ago. Even like 3 months ago, because multimodal, like, because we had to use Prompt Perfect in one chat, Bing browsing Bing browsing was available, then it wasn't available, and then but now you can use them all within one. It's amazing.
It's wild.
Dolly, Whisper.
Yeah,
you can talk to it. Whisper is the talking technology that's now available to all free users, which is crazy. But
it's come so far.
It's crazy. Yeah,
and GPTs are surprisingly, I think at first I was like, okay, these are cool, I guess. I didn't really, it took a minute to actually see how fun and how cool stuff you can build. And I think you can build really cool stuff with it.
Yeah.
So it's a crazy step up. But for me, it also makes me feel like there could be another, like, just a chat interface still isn't that great.
Yeah.
Like it's really awesome. But I wouldn't be surprised if something showed up and it within its first 12 months, it could have, 500 million users, because it's so, using AI, you can do shit that makes stuff so much easier, saves you time. And I think it's only going to get better from here, which is wild.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
They are working with that guy from Apple. Forget his name.
Johnny Ives.
Johnny Ives.
Yeah, I heard about that. I didn't
that was
know if it was official.
Months ago. Yeah, it was a long time ago. So I don't know either.
For a physical thing, like the humane pin that we talked about, but related to OpenAI, I guess.
But just thinking about something better than a chat interface, I feel like maybe there's something with that. I don't know, but
could be crazy. I mean, for me, it's like context. Anything that makes it easier to have context, detail, and background info, and then guidance on what you actually want to do. Because you have to put in everything to it now.
Yeah.
There's nothing that actually can pull the info from you yet.
Yeah.
Or like something that guides you through you giving it information and then tailors an entire aid towards you. We'll see shit like that, which would be wild.
Yeah, seriously. All right, so we're at 22 minutes. Should we talk about the Bing news? Or I'm sorry, the Google news with Bard?
You think we can get it in before 30?
I do, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not terribly crazy.
Yeah.
So today there was an announcement from Bard, or from Google really, about what they're calling Gemini, which I guess is a name that had come up beforehand.
Yeah, they've been talking about. Yeah, I heard that Google is building GPT-4 competitor called Gemini.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I didn't really know much about it beforehand, so I spent like an hour today researching what's going on. So naturally, based on this conversation, I went to Bard and I went to Prompt Perfect, which is a GPT within OpenAI. It's a GPT built on top of ChatGPT by OpenAI, obviously. And so what I did was I asked them both the exact same thing. So with Bard, and the same thing was really just research Gemini, or research the new product Gemini from Google and summarize it.
Yeah.
And I started both sentences with please. Yeah. And then, so with Bard, it told me it's multimodal. It has memory and it's able to plan things ahead. So the memory thing was really interesting to me, because we'll talk more about that with the GPTs. I think that's something that's really missing, but the ability for it to remember things, like something that I want for it to recall for me in a week from now, that's potentially something that would include, but it didn't have any specifics on it and it wouldn't tell me any more about it. And it also has various sizes, and that's something that we'll talk more about in a moment. But Then Bard told me it wasn't released yet.
Yeah.
And it referenced 3 articles from 6 months ago in May. And so I was like, all right, this is fucking dumb. So I cruised out of that and I went to ChatGPT with Prompt Perfect. And that answer actually with the exact same prompt was way better.
There you go.
And yeah, naturally. And so with that, it actually researched based on today's research, and it provided me with a much more thorough response with actually citations from today, which was fabulous. And so there are 3 levels of it. There's Pro. I'm sorry, let's start at the top. There's 3 levels. There's Ultra, Pro, and Nano. There were different size models.
Okay.
And so with Ultra, it's a powerful, I'm just going to read, what I did was I just kept on distilling it till it's down to 1 sentence of the summarization. So this is from Prompt Perfect and ChatGPT. Gemini Ultra is a powerful multimodal AI model. Multimodal meaning that it can interpret spreadsheets and use Python. It can also generate or like receive images. It can also receive texts. It can receive audio.
Nice.
So that's what multimodal means, and that's in comparison to something like Anthropic, which can't receive images, for example. But multimodal AI model designed for complex tasks, expected to surpass ChatGPT-4 in benchmarks, and used in advanced Bard chatbots. So advanced Bard chatbots include, quote, this is actually from the article or written by Bing team, quote, it surpasses human experts in 57 different areas, such as mathematics, physics, history, law, medicine, and ethics.
Wow.
Which is fucking crazy. That's not a consumer app, though. I couldn't really find much in terms of how to play with Gemini Ultra. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's an enterprise play or what, but that model doesn't really seem to be available like holistically. Then there's Gemini Pro, so one step in between, the middle layer, and that's called, or the middle level. It's versatile and competitive against 3.5, GPT 3.5.
Yeah.
It excels in varied benchmarks. And it's integrated into Google products and accessible through Google Cloud and TPU AI chips. So that's ultimately what they're using in Bard. And then Nano is optimized for mobile devices, and it distills larger language models to much smaller number of parameters. And it's used in Pixel 8 Pro, which is a phone that they offer.
Wow.
So there are 3 levels. One's optimized for phones, one optimized for regular consumption, one optimized for, I guess, really, really, really large data sets.
Yeah.
There's a shit ton. The only other things I really wrote are that there's a ton of hype on Twitter. And there was a paper written, I guess, it must have been written before today because this came out today. But it was ultimately like highlighted today in multiple tweets or multiple posts that that Gemini is way better than ChatGPT in all these metrics, and pretty much every metric on the list. There's like probably 20 and 18 or 17 it's better at. But people are saying that this is completely and totally inaccurate. And it's like it assumes certain parameters and like assumes all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so there's a ton of back and forth as to, is it as good? Is it not as good? Is it as good? Is it not as good? And like so much of the research I was doing, I had to just stop looking at Twitter because it wasn't helpful.
Yeah.
So much just opinion as opposed to fact. But I did find this one guy who uses this open source tool that allows you to have God mode. So you have a little drop down on the right hand side and you can pull up all these different models, and then it just literally splits the screen between 5 or between 3 or between 2.
Yeah.
So ChatGPT and Bard, or ChatGPT, Bard, and Anthropic.
Yeah.
And it has like 50 options in the drop down. So you can probably get it up to like 10 on the screen, depending on how big your computer is. And you type in one prompt on the bottom and it automatically sends it to all of them. And you can even add in images.
Yeah.
So he did that in 3 different prompts or 2 different prompts. One was interpreting a joke from Twitter. One was interpreting, or was actually writing some Python code, things like that. And ChatGPT ripped in all 3. It was way better than all the others and like all the examples. Bing was a little bit faster in one of the examples, but most of the things that it was pulling in terms of referencing in news were like 3 or 4 days old. One of them was like a week old.
Yeah.
And so ChatGPT still was ripping. So in the one practical actual demo that I watched on YouTube, ChatGPT ripped and was better than this new model from with Gemini by Google. So it's interesting. I think the jury's going to be out. People love to talk about this stuff. It's like Apple versus Android. I think people will always, or iPhone versus Android. Like people will always. It's good to have multiple options. I don't think that there's a world in which this overtakes everything. But ultimately, I was really interested by the optimized for mobile because I was talking to somebody recently about like how does this actually affect people, and I was like, well, if you can get it into people's hands. And he's like, well, what do you mean? I was like, well, if you can put it onto phones natively.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, you can get it on your iPhone. I was like, but most people don't have, when you look at the global population, most people don't have iPhones. Yeah. And that's something that Samsung has been working on, is putting it on natively, having large language model functionality and AI functionality through chatbots on your phone natively. That's the way you change the world, I think. So, yeah. That's nice. Cool. 7 minutes. Sorry. Yeah. No time for questions. But.
Yeah, perfect. No, I like it. People, we've had this all year long, like, ChatGPT or GPT-4 comes out, then Bing Chat comes out. then Bard comes out, then Anthropic has a more context model, then ChatGPT does GPTs and enterprise plays, and then Microsoft releases Copilot or puts it under Copilot and has more of an enterprise play.
And Perplexity is a good example.
Perplexity in there.
Cool one, yeah.
And then we have Gemini. It's like, yeah, we always do this back. We're just like slowly getting better. I don't think any of them are huge advancements ever, unless I see it. I'd like to play around with it at some point. It'd be fun to build something with it.
I was super discouraged by the fact that when I used Bard to research this, it gave me me 6-month-old references.
Yeah, it makes sense if it's similar to 3.5 because GPT 3.5 is cool and it can do certain things, but it's not super intuitive.
Yeah,
its reasoning is like a little off, and you have to be like so specific. Big context thing too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like if you're like, this is today, what's the news from today? This is the date. It might help. Maybe.
Yeah, that's a good point. I definitely didn't do that. I literally told you guys the prompt was like less than a full sentence. It's really short.
Which is how we use a lot of things like regularly. We want quick answers.
That's natural language, right? Like that's the way people will use it, because prompt engineering is certainly a massive hack.
Yeah.
But to think that any number above 1 or 5% of people are going to do it is, I think, naive.
Yeah.
But that's why prompt perfect is so sick.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
It's cool, man. Well, let's cut it there and then we'll do the second half. We'll see y'all next week.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, sound good?
Or we can record or release them both in the same week, maybe.
We could probably, up to you.
More content, the better.
That's true. Start cranking it out for our fans.
Yeah, exactly.
We actually have our first sponsor this week, Pub Beer.
Yeah, Pub Beer.
God, it's good.
Sick.